sex as part of their love language. So we're going to give a little bit of review on that tonight. And these are the verses that we were to look up where we get that biblical view of how God views sex within the marriage. According to Genesis 2, companionship is the primary purpose of marriage. You probably thought, since this topic was on sex, you probably thought maybe that was the answer. But God wants that companionship because Adam was alone. There was no animal was created that was suitable to him to be a companion that he could talk with and interact with. So God has created this marriage so that we can have a companion. The word helpmate or helper includes which of the following? A is companion. Do you all agree with that? Okay. B is an equal partner. Okay. They're created the same, man and woman. C, a slave. Probably not. That would not be one. And D, a need meter, a helpmeet. So that's what the word means. It's someone who can come alongside and help or to meet the needs of the spouse. And that's God's primary role for the wife in the marriage relationship, is to be that companion, to be that partner, and to help meet the needs of the husband. Another purpose of marriage, according to first chapter of Genesis, is procreation. One of the commands God gave them right after Adam and Eve were together was to be fruitful and multiply. That's God's mechanism for populating the earth. In our day, after what Christ has done for us, we're the primary messengers of the gospel of Christ, is people telling other people. And in order to pass that on to generations, we have to procreate. We have to create more little people that will go share the gospel, right? And so that's all in God's plan, is the way He created the marriage union. Sex is of divine origin. God has developed the process of procreating, and He created this method that we know as sex. He could have done it many other ways, right? I mean, there could be other methods, but He created it the way He did. We're going to talk about that in just a little bit. And it is created by Him as a gift to us within our marriage, and we need to view it that way. God designed marriage to provide the only atmosphere where the natural sex urge between a man and a woman may be divinely carried out. So His intention is the commitment comes first, then the gift of sexual intercourse is a result of that lifelong commitment. Now we see today in so many different places that sex before marriage, sex outside of marriage, and it takes away God's intention of that gift being exercised within this one man and one woman relationship inside of marriage. And we can all see certainly some consequences of sex outside of that natural union of marriage. Yeah, Flo, did you have a question?
Did you skip 6 and 7? We didn't send blank.
I did.
No,
I'm sorry.
I didn't know if you was going back to it or what.
No, okay, so 6.
5, 6 and
Did I
7.
miss 5 also?
7.
Oh, I did. Wow, I jumped over a bunch of them. All right, let's go back to 5. God described sexuality, our maleness and femaleness, as very good. If you go back and look at that Genesis account, which you all were supposed to go read that, when He created the animals, He said that creation was good. This is the first time after He created man and woman that He said it was very good. This was the crowning creation that God made, and that was man and woman in this, in our uniqueness. Okay, number 6, sex is or is not sin according to God's intent. It is not. It is not sin when it's in the marriage context, when it's in context of this lifelong commitment. Okay? Number 7, God gave sex as a gift to man before the fall. That's interesting to look at the timing of it, because up until that first sin of Adam and Eve, everything God created was perfect. And so we get that sense that there was nothing weird about it. There was nothing dirty about it. There was no shame or no embarrassment. It was only after sin entered the world did they even think to cover their bodies with some form of covering. It even says they were naked in the garden and had no shame. And so the way God created us, and even our physical bodies, was perfect until that sin entered in. And so within that relationship, and once we have this gift of sex within the marriage, that should be liberating for us. There should be no embarrassment or shame or any of that dealing with the topic of sex within our own marriages. I find it interesting how it's just sort of uncomfortable to even say that word in church, right? And, even teaching it, it's like, it's just odd, but that's because we've made it that way. It's not the way God intended it. But the discussions you and your spouse have should be as open and free about the sexual realm of your marriage as it is about any other part of it. That's the way God intended it. There's no embarrassment within that relationship. Okay, then we got to number 8, which was that God designed marriage to be the only atmosphere that sexual urge of men and women can be divinely carried out. On number 9, 1 Corinthians 7 suggests that sexual pleasure and fulfillment is a third purpose of marriage. It's fun, right? I mean, God designed this act to be enjoyable. Yes, it's to procreate. Yes, it's to be united in one flesh. But isn't it interesting how this gift God gave us is enjoyable? And that's His design within that confines. People will think that maybe it's enjoyable if I cheat on my spouse, and Satan will ensure that it is enjoyable to some degree, but then the sin catches up to you and the consequences hit. And so you have the physical pleasure of the act, but you don't have the emotional, spiritual, and within God's blessing. And so eventually that catches up to you when it's outside of that.
You have a tiger syndrome.
Yeah, that's right. On 11, long periods without sexual fulfillment result in temptations by Satan. I skipped 10 again. All right, I ought to put my glasses on and leave them on, I guess. That's the problem. All right, we'll come back to 11. I got a couple things to say on that. On 10, the consummation of the marriage union is by the sexual physical act. So, that first night, your wedding night, when the marriage is consummated with the sexual act, there's the commitment before God. In the traditional wedding sense, you stand in a church, you have a commitment before God, lifetime commitment, and then you consummate that with the sexual act. And if you think just about the way our bodies are even designed, it's two unique ones becoming one flesh, right? It's the way God has designed even our body parts show symbolically what He's saying in Scripture, taking two humans and they are joined together in the physical act. Okay, on 11, Long periods without sexual fulfillment result in temptations by Satan. God has not only designed the sexual act within the marriage, but he encourages it. And he even tells us in the New Testament, Paul is talking about, he has this kind of phrase about if you could be single, that you could serve the Lord, but if your sexual urges overtake you, then you need to have yourself a wife. And so he recognizes that this is just an area of temptation for all of us, is this area of sexual intimacy. And so if even within this marriage union that God has ordained, if there's long periods of time where you aren't physical, that just opens the door for Satan to cause temptation. And then it's our responsibility not to yield to that temptation if that's the case, right? So, but just be aware that the way God designed it, and we all know of different cycles, and so there's times where we're interested more in the physical act and other times we're not. And so we even see that built into our own bodies, that natural kind of tendency for things to excite us, and then other times that we're not. And so that's just a way that Satan uses to tempt us when there's a spell within the marriage where the physical act is not there. Okay, any questions on that section? We're actually going to skip over the third one, and we're going to go, I think it's number 4 on yours, the marriage roles, or is that number 3? Okay, so we reordered them. All right, so the marriage roles, this is really, those 2 sections were kind of review the first couple weeks. So this is kind of talking about within the marriage relationship, men and women just have different roles. We are equals within the marriage, but God's intent is that we serve different purposes. And we're going to kind of go through the scriptural basis for that. We get that out of Ephesians chapter 5. And this is a topic that is probably second only to the topic of sex within the church. And that's the issue of submission. It's been very maybe misinterpreted at times, but we're going to kind of go through this Ephesians chapter 5, and we're going to kind of talk about what God intends for the roles for the husband and the wife within the marriage. It was really interesting that this week I traveled to Ohio, and I heard on the radio as I was kind of leaving my workplace, headed back to the hotel, it was this very topic. It was, and the title of this book, her name is Bunny Wilson, and it was Freedom Through Submission. And as you study it, submission and submitting to the naturally ordained by God order within even our government, but especially within the family, should be liberating and freeing to us rather than building this kind of competition between the husband and wife. So we're going to kind of go through really what that means to each of us. On number 1, according to verse 21, both the husband and the wife are to submit to each other. The word submit really means to yield. It doesn't mean in a authoritarian sense. We've sort of taken that word, and when you say submit, you automatically think you're giving up your rights, you're a doormat, someone else is just walking all over you. That's not the definition of submit. It really means yielding to another person or another decision.